Hi everybody, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. Happy New Year. I hope you are ready to start this new year with some zest and inspiration and creativity. I hope it's blossoming for you. I hope you enjoy today, and that's if I can get the video out today. Today is New Year's 2024. So we're starting off the new year with a project, the Hanbok project pattern. I've already kind of talked about. I've shown lots of examples, and the pattern is already on the website. But because both of my friends here are in gray resin, they just turned out to be a pair. And so when I did the waterfall gown, I wanted them to match, and so I did his outfit with the remaining fabric from her dress. And her dress is actually remaining fabric from another project, which I'll go ahead and flash a photo. It was the kimono or hanfu outfit that I did quite a while ago. Okay, back to these guys. But I still had fabric left, and so I thought, okay, I'm not sure what color I want for her. She has the gray resin. She has a lot of blue and pink in her face. She came with the blue and purple wig with some pink up here. And so at first I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure about the green. But once it was finished, I think it has a nice, like, contrasting yet supportive color for her. I think it looks okay. I was a little nervous at first. And then, of course, he just looks cute and everything. His palette isn't so dramatic as hers because of her face up, which came on her. And so I just thought it was time to go ahead and put this dress together. I'd have someone ask about it. So we're going to go ahead and put together the waterfall gown, and let's see if I can get this off of here, the little capelet that goes with it. And the capelet turned out with a neck opening larger than I would like, but it still works. It will just either fall forward or back a little bit more so than I had wanted. And so some of the distance can be closed if you want to, like, cut your pattern and just get rid of the top part. Cut your pattern here, and that would make the neck smaller and would add a little bit more length to the front of the capelet, which at present is pretty short, and then it flows down. So it's up to you. I'm not, well, let's see, how do I say this? I am emotionally attached to my patterns in that I really enjoy making them. I love being creative, and I love seeing that process. I have fun putting them together. But I'm not emotionally attached to the point where you can't do what you want with those patterns. If you want to change them by all means. Make it fit what your vision is dictating. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and change up the camera, and we'll start on our project of putting together the waterfall gown. To make the pattern pieces easy to transfer in a file, I format them to the US letter size paper, which is 8.5 by 11 inches. So when you print them out, that's the size that they're going to print to. If you have A4 paper in your printer, I would suggest selecting like 100% or actual size, and then you may end up needing, it may shoot through a couple pieces of paper to get all the printing out, depending on how your printer is formatted. I'm not sure because I don't print on that size paper. But when you get the pieces, you're going to have some puzzles to put together, because I can't make a file with this big of paper because I can't scan it in and transpose it so that it's easy to do that. I don't have the equipment to do that. So what you'll need to do when you start is you get all the pieces cut out, and you'll have to assemble the pattern pieces because these are not ready to use. So my tissue is my actual pattern piece, showing you the size of how big this piece is. So this pattern for the waterfall gown will need large pieces of fabric. So the first one we're going to start with is the overlay, and the pieces will all have the name of the piece on them. So for instance, this is your skirt overlay A, the next one is skirt overlay B. So you'll be able to connect the right pieces together. When you connect them, I would recommend starting rather from A, from the last piece in that set. So for instance, here we have J. So I'm just going to put it down here in its place. And when you put down this one, you'll see that there's overlap here. So then it's easier to take the next piece, and it's going to overlap here. So it says connect to J. Here it says overlay to connect to I. This is I. So then when you lay it down, you're automatically covering up where these two connect, like so. And now this is still free and available for the next pieces. So I'm going backwards. So I have J, I, then I have H, which is going to come this way. And now what I still need is still exposed. So I can glue this one down. Then I have the next piece, which would be G, which is going to overlap on those overlaps, like this. Our next one is F, which will overlap on those available little overlap sections. And so by doing that, we'll just continue here. And what it does is it allows what you need to put glue on to still be exposed for the next layer. But if you start at the top, you're not going to have that layer automatically exposed, and you're going to end up having to slide things underneath a layer. So if you start at the bottom and work your way up, there's that one, D, and now C. By doing that, each time you have the glue section available and ready, and then the last piece, you would apply the glue and connect it. So then that forms the complete skirt overlay piece. And then the beginning piece will tell you that you're going to cut 2 of these. Once it's all assembled, you're going to cut 2 of this, of the fabric or lace that you choose. If you want it to be lined so that when the waterfall fold falls, you want 2 different colors showing, you would cut 2 of your fabric and then 2 of your lining. If you use just a lace piece, you would only need to cut 2 because you're not going to be lining it. You're just going to be finishing the edge. So, or a chiffon, you wouldn't want to necessarily line a chiffon, so you would just cut 2, and then you just finish off the hem edge. So that's how you'd put this one together. Now I'm going to collect all these. So let's see, I'm going to keep them in order, I think. A, B, C, D, E. But anyway, that shows how to put together the piece for the overlay. Move these to the side, and then I'll move my tissue. The next piece will be the front, and it's going to be done the same way. And since this one's a little smaller and easier for me to reach, I'll show what I was talking about. If you start with A, which I mean you can do it, now in order to fit B, you're going to have to actually put the glue, and then it's going to have to go underneath. And then you'd have to do the next one, you'd have to put the glue and slide underneath both of those. But if you're more comfortable doing that, that's totally fine. Then we have D, so that would have to go underneath here, which if you like that, like I say, that's fine. We'll put this back. And then the last one will fit together here. So there's our pieces for the skirt front. And of this you would cut one piece, but this edge, it says cut with the center front on the fold. So this edge is going to be on a folded fabric, and then you would just cut one of the skirt front. So there's what that piece will look like. So move these over to the side. Then next we have the skirt back. So it's going to follow the same idea. So here we have A and B, then C, then D. I'm not having as much trouble right now because there's no glue on these, so they're not sticky. So there's D, let's see, E and F. So here's all the pieces to create the skirt back. Line it up a little better. There we go. So here again was the total piece, what it would look like all together. And you're going to cut two of the skirt back. So this is the center pack, and then this is the side seam. So we'll take all these pieces, scoot them out of the way. All right. Then the last piece to be assembled would be the cape piece. Oh, and I layered everything on here. There we go. All right, so we have piece number A. Number A. No, not quite correct, is it? Letter A. So here's piece A. Then piece B, piece C, and D. So that was what the cape would look like, and then you would need to cut one of fabric and one of facing or lining. And here again, it's kind of the same type of thing. If you want a cape to be lined, then you would need the facing. If you choose to do this out of a lace or a chiffon or a pretty tulle or whatever you want to use that's see-through, that you don't want it to be lined, then you would just finish the center front and this edge. The center back is where the two are going to be sewn together. So you would just cut two. That should say two. My mistake. This should say two. Cut two, because you have to sew the center back together. So right now, if you're watching and you have the pattern set, go ahead and write a number 2 on both of those, because that is incorrect. You need 2. And I don't know why I had a 1 there. But there is the cape pattern piece, and then you would finish the front and the hem and the neckline however you choose. If you want to cover it with just bias tape to have a binding, if you want to create a collar, you can, or if you want to just hem it, however you want to finish that, it's totally up to your own preference. But that's how the cape pieces fit together. So that'll do it. So we have the cape pieces. There is the overlay piece that is going to be gathered. So this piece also has to be assembled. So it just lays like this, and connect those, and make sure you have top edge and top edge together. Of course, it's kind of hard to do it in either way unless it's, you know, upside down. But there we go. And then this top edge and the bottom edge will be gathered to match the length of this top edge and this top edge when you gather that together. And then this will have darts. And then this is an optional shoulder puff that will have the edges either finished, or you can cut a facing piece and then turn it right side out, then gather these edges, and that would produce just, I don't know if I can get it to work with just paper. We'll gather that. And then it will just produce a puff on the shoulder that you can either have it scrunched, or you can kind of pull it out and create like a slight shoulder wrap if you want to use that piece. That's what this one is for. And then we have the back pieces, which you would need a facing and a fabric piece, and then this will sew to this edge once the darts are in place. This is what goes around the back of the doll, and then connects in the back. I'm sorry, maybe the skinnier edge actually, because that's the center back. So there's our pieces and how they are assembled. So I just had so many that had to be put together in this set that I thought, well, we'll just take some time to explain how those work and how you use those. So now we need to cut out our fabric. For the wings, there's a couple of different things you could do. I did put them on the paper so that each wing is in two pieces. So you can either connect them together, or you can just keep them separate to give more movement in the wings. But when I do wings, what I like to do is I have this clear acetate sheets. You can get them probably at like some of your bigger craft stores. And basically it is just clear plastic sheeting, and you can use that to make the wings. And I usually trace wings onto the acetate with a permanent marker. In my experience, Sharpies usually work the best. They're kind of the most common go-to brand. And so you can simply put the plastic, on top of your pattern. There we are. And trace it on, and then color it in with the Sharpie markers. I have found I like using the Sharpie versus paint because this is flexible, and if it bends, most paints will crack and peel off. But if you're using a Sharpie permanent marker, you maintain the flexibility of the plastic and it doesn't ruin the ink. Sometimes it might be beneficial to, if you know they're going to have a lot of movement, is once you get it drawn on and colored in, to go ahead and spray it with a spray sealant, because that sometimes would have, because it's sprayed on, it's like a mist being applied. It lands differently than a brush stroke, and so sometimes the flexibility won't ruin the adhesive that you've sprayed on, whereas a brush stroke that's put on would crack if you bend it. So that's just my suggestion. And this, like I say, you can buy. It does yellow over time, but I will say that these particular sheets I bought in, oh goodness, I'll say 1992. So let's see, 92, 2002, 2012, 2022. So these sheets are 30 years old. So, I mean, that's to be expected that after 30 years, you might have some discoloration. It takes a long time unless you're going to have them, sitting in direct sunlight. But like this piece underneath here, it doesn't look as yellowed, but it's kind of bent. Well, I guess it is. So it's like after 30 years, I have 2 sheets and a couple little salvages left. And that's why the cover of this looks as horrible as it does. So I bought these because I was doing graphic work and I had to layer it was old school layout. There was no computer stuff like you can do now so easily, and so all my layers for different colored inks were literally glued onto cardstock and acetate for the printer to print the runs in different colors. So yeah, that's what I had this for, and don't do it anymore, but I still have some of this plastic, so I like to use that on crafty things. So there's an idea for making your wings if you want to go ahead and include the fairy wings in your project. So we'll take a look at the pattern choices I have here. So the gown itself is going to be all this soft kind of a sea foam green, and just to try this out, I thought this is fabric that I already have. So this is a cotton fabric, and if you want to do a gown in a lot softer fabric, it's all a matter of choice and what you have. But this is going to be a cotton as far as the underlay of the gown. And then I have a light chiffon overlay for the overlay part of the gown. And then my little pieces here are the chiffon, let's see, where's the little sleeve puffs. I did cut 4 of these pieces, so I may just go ahead and sew them and then turn them out so that I'll have finished edges and I won't have to hem those edges. So each little sleeve puff has 2. You can kind of do that however you choose. You can either do that with a facing or just hem the edges, however you want to work that. There are 4 of the little back pieces, 1 of the facing, and then the little gathered part that will go on top. For the cape, I am going to make this reversible, so the cape can either be this floral print, or you can just turn it over and it will be the green. So when I finish this, I am going to be putting, right sides together, then turn it out. But on the front and the neck edge, I'll just finish that with bias tape. So it'll just be not hemmed, but it'll be finished around the edge. And then it'll have ties rather than like a pretty buckle or something like that. Because then when you turn it inside out or right side out, however, you don't want that buckle lump to be on the inside of the garment, so I'm not going to use that. I'm just going to use little ties to tie it shut, so it can either be the floral exposed or the green. So that's what I'm doing with the cape. I had enough fabric that then the overlay for the skirt that I showed is here, and that's the chiffon, just in case you're wondering what that big piece was. So then that's the cape, but I had enough fabric that I thought, I'll go ahead and do this for my gray Angel Studio Jing and the gray Miro Doll Rain. And I went ahead and cut out pants from the green, and then I had enough of the floral to do a Hanbok vest. This is from the BTS Idol Hanbok collection. So I'm going to do a long vest out of the floral, And then the white Hanbok style shirt will be, let's see if I can move the paper, the white on white print. So he'll have a white shirt, green pants, and then the floral Hanbok, but then they'll have matching set. So I had enough fabric to do it. I thought, why not? I also still have, I'll have to grab this, see if it'll show. I have some green tulle that's the same seafoam green that I may do like a petticoat underskirt for the gown, but I'm not sure. I'll see how it lays once it's finished, and if I want to add more puff, I can always use this tulle, and I still have some of the green left. I could do an underskirt for under the gown, but I'm not sure if I'll even worry about that, but I do have it available if I choose. So that's the pieces I'm going to put together. As far as the male pieces, how to sew these pieces are in other videos, so I'll just go ahead and put that together. But I thought, well, I have the fabric out, I have my patterns handy, I'll go ahead and cut these pieces out, and we'll have another matching outfit. So here we go, we're ready to sew. We're going to set aside the pieces of the fella's outfit. So let me grab the pants, shirt, and Hanbok jacket. And we'll start with the cape, just because that's the one I want to do first. So we'll move our pieces to the side. So on the cape, the first step is going to be, we're just going to sew the center back seam together on the floral with the right sides together, and then also with the green. Now we'll press the seam open and press all the little wrinkles out, and then we're going to lay these two pieces with right sides together like this. There we go. And I'm going to sew all the way around the entire thing, and I'll probably leave a little section down here open, just as if you were sewing a pillow, just all the way around the edge. And you'll kind of have to work the pieces because it's going to be a little rumply. And so yeah, it'll start like here, go all the way around, up the front, around the neck, and then down the other front, and then all the way back down to here, leaving about this much open so that we can flip it right side out. Now that it's sewn all the way around, except for the small opening, I will flip it right side out. There was a brief break in when I was sewing around because I had forgotten to put the little ties in so that I could sew them. So I tucked them inside the right sides together and then sewed them when I did the seam, and just back tacked over a little bit to hold them secure. And I'm looking, I may go in a little bit deeper here because I think I may have gotten it too low, or I might just take these stitches out and move this piece up a little bit, and so that way it's closer to the actual edge of the neckline. So I'll probably make that adjustment, and then we'll flip it right side out and get it pressed and take a look at it. And here is the finished little capelet. So it does have the little waterfall effect. I do find that the neckline is bigger than I'd wished, so I might adjust a pattern if I make another one, but it will go still around her shoulders, and it'll just have a very loose neckline, so it can either be you can tighten that up and make it smaller if you finish off with a bias tape, sewing it to the edge that would bring that edge in, because then the top of the bias tape would create the new edge. I'm still debating if I'm going to do that or if I'm just going to leave it simple like this, but that's what it looks like. And so if it falls, it has all the little folds to create the waterfall hemline. And then the back has plenty of folds as well, so it can lay like this. There we go. And have the same fold. And because it is cotton, it doesn't fall as smoothly as like a satin might fall, like a lightweight satin, but I still like the colors, and I like that this way it's reversible, so you can also turn it this way, and then the floral will peek out underneath in those folds with the green on top. So it can be like this. So either way you can use it, and then the ties, it doesn't matter that way. So that's the little capelet. Now we're on to the dress. So the first piece I'm going to work with is the overlay on the skirt. In my brain, I just want to get this chiffon stuff finished off so that it doesn't fray all over the place. So I'm going to do this first. When I do the chiffon, there's a couple different ways that people like to finish out chiffon. I've had different doll clothing that I've purchased, and for example, some of my Tonner dolls have gowns with chiffon, and when, let's see, I'm going to move the stitch to a longer stitch length, and those dresses, because I was looking at them to see how they were actually constructed, and oh, let's see, I'll move my camera maybe a little bit here. Those gowns, the chiffon was simply turned over and hemmed without anything done to the edge. So I was looking at those gowns, so we'll do our little sample here and take it out. And so the hems look like this, then they're pressed. Let me grab my little iron, I'll press it real quick. And it looks like this. So for a collector item that's not going to be jostled very much, I mean, you could do that. I could make those a little bit smaller, I guess. And that's all that was done on those dresses. But I don't really like the idea of this raw edge. Granted, it's not going to fray as bad as a straight edge would because of the curve. It's cut on a bias, and so it's not going to fray as badly as this would. But still, there's a chance that it could fray and wear over time. And if you're one who likes to change outfits a lot on your dolls, you might not prefer this method. The other method that I saw that I think I kind of like better is very, very tedious. Very tedious. But let's see, we'll load our fabric into the machine. But you start with just sewing a straight seam about 1/8 of an inch from the edge of the fabric. So we'll just make our little edge here. So it's just sewing 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric, or approximately that. There we go. And then you use that as an edge to turn your fabric once, and then turn the fabric again. Let's see if my fingers will work. And then you're going to have a regular turned hem, and that little bit of thread actually gives a really nice turning guide for having something that you can manipulate a little bit easier than trying to just straight fold it twice and then hem, and then you just sew close to that thread that you've already sewn. And so you have something, I don't know, it is easier. It just gives something easier to fold against. I guess I'm being a little redundant there, aren't I? But when you fold it, then it's so much easier than trying to have just raw fabric and fold raw fabric twice. So then you can kind of tuck under that thread, and it's just so much easier to manipulate that way. So this is the route that I'm going to choose when I go all the way around all that chiffon. And it also kind of guarantees that you know how much is actually folded under, because you've already done the first stitch. So you know that when you go to sew that, it's going to give, there's enough turn under of fabric for the needle to actually secure it. So I hope that makes sense. But then that's what this edge looks like, which is what I prefer. I just think it looks neater. And then on the outside, you have a real pretty little hem. And so it doesn't, there is a little bit more bulk to it, but it also, in my opinion, looks nicer than the other ones. So let's grab this one and compare. And like I say, this one, it's, you know, you're trying to keep it even, but it was a little bit harder. And I did reduce the stitches on this. But so this has less fabric in the turn, but in my opinion, I just like it better to have this one. So this is the method I'm going to choose on the dress today. So just thought I'd do that for an example. I'm also going to do the straight center back edges, because when I sew this together, because of the way I'm going to assemble the gown, this seam will then be opened. It won't be like serged shut, because the opening of the back of the dress is going to come from here down to about here. So I need that seam to be able to open so that the back can split open for the back opening, to where if you serge this and have it shut, it's harder to get this part to lay nicely because these are stuck together. For now, I'm going to go ahead and finish the center back edges, and then I will go ahead and sew it together, and then I will start, let's see, up here and go down and around, because this again is going to be the first drop in that waterfall fold, like so. There we go. So I'm going to finish off the top edge, then all the curved and the center back edges. So the hem is all done on my chiffon, and I have not connected the top actual torso edge yet, and I'm not sure if when I connect it, if I just want them side by side or if I'll actually overlap just a tiny bit to make it easier, because this top line of the edge of the skirt will need to be gathered to match the top part of the bust part of the dress. So I will be doing 2 lines of stitching, just a base stitch, in order to gather this edge to meet that portion. But the back is all done, and the back seam is all finished, and so it looks nice and finished. Next, oh goodness, I caught it on my needle. Let's kind of gently rub that little nick out. That wasn't very good. There we go. The next step I'm going to work on is putting the skirt of the dress together. So to do the skirt, and I've got fur from a wig project all over my fabric, so I'll grab some tape and I'll just tap it and get a lot of that faux fur off of there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to serge the back, the center back edges, which, oh, I don't even need to do that. I'd forgotten. So I actually cut those on the machine edge of the fabric, so I won't even have to do that. So there we go. I don't even have to finish that because it's just the machine edge of my fabric. But this back will also be stitched, and then the seam allowance will be open, and I'll stitch to about the same distance from that top edge as I did on the chiffon. And then I'll put the side seams together with the front, and then I will serge those seams. Then I'll hem the whole thing, and then this top edge, once it's put together, will also be gathered so that it can fit the top part of the bust. So we'll get this much done on the skirt, and then I'll come back because it's just going to be a lot of long straight seams and then serging and then hemming again. So we're not going to use a lot of film time for that, but I'll come back when we have that much done. Once again, I have a couple of my little scrap pieces, and I thought I would show kind of the difference in the way that I like to gather the waist or the bust line that's going to connect to the upper torso, or like the bodice part. And so here we have just a scrap of fabric for an underlay, and then the scrap for the overlay. There's a couple ways you can gather fabrics, and the first one that some people might like to do, and it certainly is the most convenient as far as time, is to sew both of the fabrics together. So I've got my basting stitch ready here, and so you just kind of sew one line, and then whenever you're going to gather, be sure you don't cut the thread right next to your fabric. I always like to do 2 lines of sewing, of basting, just because in the event that a thread should break, you still have another thread to hold it in place. Plus, it will also help those gathers to be a little more even. So now I always gather with the top threads. So I grab the top 2, and the reason being is because then the top thread is going to be shorter. So if you want to remove any showing threads, you have less to remove than the back side, and I'll kind of show that here in a minute. But so when you gather both layers together, which is totally an option, we'll go ahead and do that. And then we grab the top 2 on the other side here. If my thumbnail can get underneath it. Here we go. And of course, if you guys, if you're sewing for a long time, you know this, but it's just a good little bit of information for anyone who is beginning to sew. So here we're going to go ahead and gather this to where it meets, and we're just pulling on those top threads to where now we have a gather. So here we have both of the fabrics gathered together. Now what will happen if you choose this method, which is totally fine, oh, I just have papers falling off behind me, is that these fabrics have been gathered together, so all these little indents or ruffles are also together. And even if you pull that apart and kind of lift them up and out, they're still going to fall back in kind of that same way. Also, to gather them both at the same time, both of the edges of length have to be the same distance. And often in some of my designs, I might have an overlay fuller than an underskirt, or the underskirt more full than an overlay. So my edges don't always have the same length. So a lot of times it's not really an option, but if they are the same length, this is totally something you could do. Then when you attach it to another piece, if you were to sew it here, if any of this thread shows, it's really easy to just snip this thread. Let's see if we can do this easily, is you just find one little thread, and because it's so tight, you can easily just pull that out, and then you've removed any threads that show. Whereas if it's on the back, you've got a lot of thread that has not been pulled taut because it's the opposite side. And so to get it out of there, it takes a little bit more work sometimes, just because there's more thread going in and out of all these ruffles. So that's why I choose to gather on the top thread. And here again, it kind of shows that if one of your threads breaks, then you've still got another line of sewing that's keeping those ruffles intact. So if you go ahead and get that pinned and sew it together, you won't lose all your work of gathering. And on some of the dresses I've made in the past, like my wedding dress, there was so much gathering on heavy satin. I did not want to lose all that work. So I always do a double line to gather. So that's doing both of them at the same time. The other option that I'm going to be using today is to sew separately. So what happens, it's a little more work, and we'll do our 2 lines of basting on the bottom layer or the underskirt layer here. There we go. And give us plenty of thread to hold on to. Then of the overlay, I'm just trying to get to where all these holes, because it is just scrap fabric. There we go. And then I'll do another line of stitching. It's just easier to show the technique on this little piece. Kind of fits in the frame a little bit better. Okay, so now we have 2 layers, and so the gathering is going to be the same way. So we're going to grab the top 2 threads and gather this. So fancy, right? To do on a piece of scrap. But it kind of shows the technique, so hopefully it'll be helpful for you. So here you can see we've got the top layer gathered and all puckery there. Now we'll do the underlay layer and grab my threads here. And then the other side. Okay. And gently, and use a basting stitch for this. It's just a long stitch, so it's easy to have less tension on your thread, and you can slide the fabric on there. So now the advantage of having these 2 puckered and gathered separately is now when I lay the overlay on top, yes, I have 2 layers of fabric, but I can adjust one or the other length so that it all fits the same given length that I need to fit onto a bodice. But the layers are not going to be gathered exactly the same, and so the top layer is not going to fall into and get caught in the folds of the under layer, and that's why I like it. So now if we take our pieces, let's see if my foot will stay up here, and go ahead and put on a normal stitch length, and we'll put our fabric into the machine and line up our edge here. And I didn't pay real close attention on how far down I stitched, so we're just gonna try to make the edges match. Here we go. So then as we sew this together, now we have a garment that's ready to be put onto a bodice, but now our layers are not puckered the same in the exact same way. And so it just gives a more honest fall for the upper layer, and it won't get caught in the same folds because they've been layered apart from each other. And it's just the method that I prefer to use. And so then once it's sewn, we can take this layer of thread that we talked about that's real taut and is our gathering layer, and it's easy to pull that out so it doesn't show once we've sewn, and then this would all be inside the garment. But then it's just a nice, in my opinion, I like it better. I think it gives a nicer look to the garment than having everything just gathered the same, because then it doesn't come apart and fall as freely. So those are the two methods you can use when you're gathering an overlayer and an underlayer. Whichever one is more easy for you, whichever one you feel more comfortable with, is totally fine. That's just the two most common ways to do this and the way that I prefer. And so whichever way you want to do it is fine, but that's just an explanation of why I'm going to do it in the manner that I did. Plus my two layers do not have the same measurement. So I've basted the top edge of the underskirt, and I did put a slight notch at the center seam, or at the center, front center, not center seam, but the front center, so that I'll know where the center is. And so this is all ready to be gathered at the top. I've also basted across the top of my chiffon, so it's ready to be gathered. My next step is going to be working on the actual bust or torso piece, and I forgot when I cut them out that I needed 2 of these pieces. And so the first thing I'll do is I've marked on the edges where my dart is going to be, and once I get the dart in, we're going to have 4 of them to do. So let's see if my machine will work here. So I'm going to put a pin in and out at the markings so that it kind of gives me a way to fold and have that marking where I want it. There we go. So that's where the fold is, and I'm going to sew from the little marking that I made here down to the marking there. So I'm just going to create that dart, and we'll start here. And then I'm going to come down here where it was marked. I'll take my pin out. There we go. And so this will be done on all 4 positions of these 2 pieces. But once I have the dart in, this is a lot of excess fabric. And so I'm also going to trim away a bunch of that excess fabric down to about 1/8 of an inch. I'm just going to cut a bunch of this out of the way. So then I will press it open, and that will create the part that will go around the bust. So I'm going to do that to both of these pieces and have all the darts put in. Then my next step for the bodice will be to gather both the top and bottom edges of this long piece. So I'll be gathering the top and bottom, and then this piece will be sewn onto this piece, and it will end right here. So it's only going to go that far. So it's going to be gathered to fit just this piece. So here is the facing piece that has the darts in and the back pieces, like the side back pieces, attached. So that's made to go around the doll like this. And this piece is all ready, all finished. Then I have the front piece, and what I've done is I've put a small little mark right here so that I know which edge is the top and then which edge is the bottom that will be attached to the skirt. And then on the little overlay piece, I've notched the top and then just cut a little tiny slit in the center of the bottom edge so that I know there as well. But it's not going to be a huge big deal because I'm going to be pinning this to the piece almost as I gather it. So what I'm going to do, and because I'm pinning it directly as I gather it, I only did the one line of stitching because I'm going to be putting it right in place right away. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and pin the very center on the top edge. And then I'm going to pin the center on the bottom edge so that it will be held in place. And there we go. Now I'm going to take the top strand of thread and kind of hold it tight. And if I can get the top one separated, there we go. And I'm going to gather this to match the length of the underlay piece. So I'm just going to slide the fabric along here and hold on to that little thread and gently slide it in to where it matches the length of the little underlay piece. There we go. We'll get this, and then I'm going to pin the edge to the end there. And I'm keeping that top thread handy because I might need to adjust some of the gathers. So I'm going to pin the end of it. There we go. And now I'll pin this top edge in place. I think I need to pull it a little bit more taut. There we go. So that those will match. And I'm just going to even out those little gathers along that top edge and get it all pinned on. Let's see if I like that placement. Yeah, I think that'll look all right. Put a few more puckers closer to the center. Even these out, because I want them to be puckery, but I don't want a lot of like pleats in it. I just want a nice little pucker all the way around. All right, so then we'll get another pin. And then another pin right about there. And there we go. So there's that one side top edge. So now I'll do that to the other side and then both halves of the bottom so that this will all be on. And then I'm going to go ahead and baste across that to hold it in place onto this piece. Once I get that done, I will go ahead and take the side backs and they will be attached to this piece once the overlay is all stitched and secure. Here we have the front all put together. So we have all the gathered chiffon on there, and I am pleased with how that looks. So that'll be our front of the bodice. So I'll gather up the skirt pieces and sew them to the bottom edge of this, and then I'll just leave enough seam allowance so that that can be finished on the edges. So I'll probably do that because I think it'll be easier to get the skirt on here if I don't have this kind of flapping in the way, and then I'll put this on after the skirt is attached. I've finished putting the chiffon layer onto the bodice, So it will look like this, and then I'll just need to take out these little threads that still show. Now that I have the chiffon layer on first, because it's the top layer, now I'm going to insert the skirt so that the right side of the skirt faces the wrong side of the chiffon. And I'm just going to put it inside here, because then once it's finished and you lift up the chiffon, the right side is on the outside, and then also on the skirt, I've got lots of threads everywhere, the right side of the skirt is also facing out. So I've got my skirt gathered, and now I will go ahead and pin it into place and then sew it into place as well. And I'm going to just take the edges of the skirt and line them up with the edges, like the center back seam of the chiffon, so it's the same. And the reason I do this is because I want the chiffon to fall completely separate from the skirt. I don't want it attached to the skirt, so it's just going to lay right on top, and then that opening is large enough to get the doll inside, and then it will overlap when we put the closures on. But I like the skirt to fall completely separate from the underskirt. So I'll go ahead and get this all pinned and sewn into place, and then I'll be ready to go ahead and put that facing on the bodice, and we can finish this part up. So here the bust line is attached to the skirt. So we have a little bit of an overlap here, and I've been working at getting some of these little threads taken out, but it wasn't too hard to do because, like I say, they were kind of taut along the top, so I could do that. So I have the overskirt in place. The back has these all finished now. They look real nice. So when the back meets and overlaps, it will all be finished there. So my next step is going to be to add that facing to the top torso part. So I will start by pinning the center front top edge in place like this, and then go all the way around down to the back edge. And then when I sew, I will sew, here we can line it up here. There we go. I'll sew up and then across, but I have to be careful not to get any of this fabric in my seam. So I want to be careful to only take just that 1/4 of an inch seam and not catch any of my back, center back skirt edges in that seam. So I'll be real careful when I stitch that together. And then so I'll sew all the way from the raw edge of the fabric up, because then those edges are going to turn up, and then I'll be able to hand sew the facing in place when I flip it over. But that's pretty much all that I'm going to need to do for the actual construction of the gown, and then we'll have the little shoulder puffs to put together once the gown is finished and I get the closures on so I can see how it fits, because then I'll be able to determine where I want to place the little shoulder puff. And here is what it looks like once I have the facing all turned over and pinned in. So now I just need to stitch this in by hand down here to hide all that, all those raw edges. So then it will be ready to fit to the doll and overlap, and then find it where it fits. And then this is the bust line. And go ahead and put the closures on that, and then maybe we'll go ahead and see how it looks on the doll. And here is the finished gown and cape. So here's how the front looks, and we'll just swing her around a little bit before we take off the little waterfall cape. So there's the back's kind of tucked in under the doll stand there. But there we go. We'll let this kind of fluff a little bit. There we go. Keep spinning her around. So that is how it looks with the cape on. Then we'll untie this. And then this is what the front of the dress looks like. So I just went ahead and put some little pearls and bead embellishment on the front. The little puffs are just sewn, turned right side out, and then the ends are gathered and just tacked under the arm. So let's see if we can lift an arm up here. And there we go, and they're just tacked to the side right here. So that's what the little arm puffs look like. So I almost decided to not put the little puffs on, but it didn't look finished, so I went ahead and finished up the little arm puffs. Let's see if her arm's a little snappy. And then here's the little waterfall overlay that comes down here. So all in all, I am very pleased with how it looks, and especially with her coloring. I like it. So that's the waterfall gown and the little cape. And feel free to make any other adjustments that you might happen to like. We'll swing her around now that the cape is off and move her hair. And that's what the back looks like. And it did end up being a little bit big, so the overlap is a little bit more than I had planned, but with the fullness of the skirt, it still looks all right. So this pattern would probably also work for larger dolls. Probably the Miro doll Iris on their 70 centimeter body would probably be able to wear this. It might just need a little bit more length because she's quite a bit taller than this doll, but I think the bust would be fine to go around her because she does have a larger torso, and I think this would work. It does end up being a lot of fabric because of all the gathering. So if you didn't want as much bulk around in here, you could make these pieces more A-line as far as the skirt goes, and that would reduce the bulk in the top there. But I was very happy with how it all fit together and how it looks. So there you go. That's how to sew this dress. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you next time. Have a wonderful new year, and yeah, we'll keep going and keep creating. Bye.